Hi everyone, this is Gary Bowers with the Native Plant Society of Texas. We're going to start the virtual walk here shortly. We're resolving some technical issues with some of our panelists. Yes. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is go around the room and ask for the panelists to introduce themselves. And let me stop showing that application there. We'll start with Kathy McCormick.
Hello there, this is Kathy McCormick. How's everybody doing? All right, I'm going to mute myself again.
All right, and Randy Pensabene. We've got just a bit of an echo, but go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. My name is Randy Pensabene. I'm the current president for the Native Plant Society of Williamson County. And I'm looking forward to this webinar. Gary's done a lot of nice work to set this up, so it should be fun. Thank you all for coming today.
All right, go ahead and mute yourself, Randy, if that's okay. Thank you. And then Sue, if you're able to unmute, then go ahead and introduce yourself. Oh, you're good.
I'm good. I can now talk. I'm a past president of the Native Plant Society and an avid native plant person. And the best way to learn about plants is to go on walks. So join us.
All right. Thank you so much. And I think I neglected to introduce myself. Again, my name is Gary Bowers. I'm going to be the walk lead for today. I'm also going to be a bit of the facilitator for any of the questions or problems that arise from the technical side. What we're going to do is we're going to be going through Berry Springs Park, and I'm going to show you a little bit about where the park is. And I have a couple of polls to kind of get a little bit of an idea of who all is on the call. And we've got about 37 attendees, and I'm not sure if that's inclusive or exclusive of the staff. So the first thing I wanted to do is distribute a poll. So attendees, you should see a poll that's going to display on your screen. And I'm going to kick that out now. So do you live in Williamson County, Texas? And we'll let everybody respond. All right, we're about 74% responded. So it looks like we've got about 45% that are in, and then 55% that are not inside of Williamson County. So go ahead and close that poll. And then for those of you that are on the call, have you ever visited Berry Springs Park and Preserve, regardless of whether you lived in Williamson County or not? Okay, so about 43% yes, 57% no. So we've got a lot of people that haven't been to the park yet. So this would be a good introduction. All right. And then my final question for you is, maybe I should have asked, have you ever heard of the Native Plant Society? But are you currently a Native Plant Society of Texas member? Oh, we're evenly split there. Oh, nope, we climbed over a little bit. All right, so 48% yes, and then 52% no. So roughly half. Okay, very good. Now, continuing on with a couple of the administrative things, what I want to do is want to walk through some of the handouts. And again, you should be able to see either a button or some sort of an icon that shows you the handouts. And we're going to walk through those. Let me share Adobe with you. So the first handout that I'm going to talk about here is this definition and resources. And Sue, I blatantly plagiarized this from one of the handouts that you had already had. And then I just added a little bit of the definitions at the top. So let me touch on those definitions. So an indigenous or a native plant is one that evolved or occurred naturally, so without any human intervention in a specific region or environment. When we talk about a Texas native plant, what we're talking about is one that was native to Texas, indigenous to Texas, before any sort of European settlement. We do include any plants that were moved or cultivated by Native Americans. We do include those in our definition of native plants. And then we're not going to see any today, I don't believe, that are endemic plants. But an endemic plant is a native plant, but its range is very, very restricted. So it's only something that you're going to see in a very small area, whether it be an ecoregion called the Blackland Prairie, or maybe there's just a plant that only grows on the Balcones Canyonlands, which is an area in kind of the southwest version of or region of Williamson County, extending down into Travis. There are also some resources in this handout, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but I do want to point out the books. There's a list of books that we recommend if you're more interested in learning about native plants here in Williamson County. And one of those books is, you guys will have to tell me if I'm not displaying this correctly, panelists, but one of those is this Native Texas Plants, Landscaping Region by Region. One of these books will go to some lucky attendee today. At the end of the meeting, I'll just random number and I'll reach out via email. There's probably a lot of people thinking, oh, I should have given a real email address. All right, so that's the first handout there. The second handout that I want to talk about is one that was sent out by the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, which is another great resource for native plants. And what this one is when is a guest a pest? So when we talk about an invasive plant, what do we mean by that? And this is a really great handout that talks about when you introduce a plant into an environment, what happens, what can happen, and why would we call something invasive? All right. Was there anything that you wanted to add to that, Sue or Randy? I heard somebody jump on.
Not at this time.
Okay. And then finally is the Berry Springs plant list. So one of the things that our chapter does is we go through and we do sort of informal plant surveys. It's one of the things that we'll do for our field trips. We go out to the park. We have folks with us like Sue and Randy and Kathy, and oftentimes we'll have a botanist with us to help us identify some of the less common plants. We put together an informal survey. We're not throwing hula hoops into the air and then, counting the number of plants that fall into that hula hoop. So we're not doing a sort of statistical, that's why we call it informal. But these are all the plants that our team has identified out at Berry Springs Park. All right. And so we're not going to see all of those today. Obviously, we would be here for a very long time, and you would be very tired of my voice by then. All right, so let me close that. And now what I want to do is talk about where Berry Springs Park is. So I didn't ask the question about who was in Texas and who was not, but regardless, we'll show you where Berry Springs Park and Preserve is and talk about the trail that we're going to be going to. So it may be a little choppy on your screen, but I'll readjust here so you can see it in general. Okay. Oops, there we go. All right, so we've got the county road down here. This is the way that you're going to come into the park. And what I want to do is get this adjusted so that I can show you the route. And from here, I want to turn.
We are in Williamson County near Georgetown, Texas. those that aren't from this area.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh, my camera is in the way, so let me get that out of the way for now.
We're also right there at the intersection of the 130 tollway and I-35.
Correct.
Yes.
All right. So panelists, let me know if this doesn't show up on your screen quite the way I want it to, but what I'm going to do is highlight. This is where you're going to come into the park off of the county road. You'll travel through the park, come to this upper parking lot. And this is specifically for the nature trail that we're going to be talking about today. Park there in that upper lot. Then they've mowed a nice little pathway. You can cut down through the grass and the hill, or you could follow the service road down. I came down through the grass, get onto this concrete trail here around the loop. Going to keep walking and walking and walking. And about a mile in, after you come through the underpass, you'll come to what is called the nature trail. Now, there's a lot of other trails in here that are very nature oriented, but this is the quote unquote nature trail. Now, let me clear that and zoom in just a little bit more. And let me get rid of my highlighter. And what I want to do is we're going to start with the virtual walk. There's a kiosk right here that has a little bit of information about some of the plants that you're going to see on the trail. It's something that our field trips team worked very hard on. That would be, at least for the folks that are on the line now, that's Kathy McCormick and Sue Wiseman are part of the field trips team. And let me grab my highlighter again. So we'll start here. We're going to look at some plants that are there. We'll walk the trail, go through the Cedar Grove, around, down this power line, come kind of close to the creek, and then end back at the start. So that's essentially the walk that we're going to be doing. And we're going to do that through a pre-recorded video. And the reason that we do that as opposed to doing it live is, one, it can be very windy, and that makes it very difficult to hear. And the other is this is a pretty good sized highway, and you'll hear some trucks and things in the background, but I've tried to clean that up as much as possible. And let me clear the drawings, and away we go.
Hi everyone, my name is Gary Bowers, and I'm a member of the Williamson County chapter of the Native Plant Society of Texas. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be taking a walk down the nature trail here at Berry Springs Park and Preserve. It's one of our fantastic parks here in Williamson County. I was trying to get a little bit of intro before we got down here, but it was a bit windy in the parking lot and it was very hard to hear. So we just went ahead and took that quick walk down here, and we'll welcome you down here. We're going to take a walk down the right-hand side of the trail, and we'll go around the loop, down a little dog leg, and then we'll come right back here to the area at the kiosk. So again, thanks for joining us. Let's go. Okay, we're going to take a look at this plant here. See, it's just behind me from the kiosk, growing over here in the upper corner. You'll see it's very popular with this little butterfly. Anyone know what this plant is? If you said dewberry, that is right. You'll see it does have little 3 leaflets. And if I can get a good photo of the stem here, here we go. You'll notice this one's not too bad, but a lot of them are very, very thorny. This visitor over here. So this is a good nectar plant, obviously, for early spring. It's one of our first, well, not necessarily one of our first, but one of our early bloomers. And these dewberries are delicious when they are ripe. Right. Slowly swing you back around over here. And I want to take a look at a couple of examples of plants that are right here. Two common native plants. One is a vine, one is a tree, a small shrub, small tree. This is a Mustang grape. If you flip it over, what we like to tell people, this is a very immature one, so it's early in the season. Flip it over, I like to say they're smooth and soft, like touching a Mustang, the horse, not the car. And then this is growing on top of one of our native plum trees. This is a Mexican plum. At least in my yard, these just finished blooming. And you can see, if we get the focus right, probably too close. Still too close. There we go. So it's got some very, very early plums on here. These will ripen as we get closer to the summer. They'll turn a nice kind of reddish pinkish color. Somebody else might describe that color a little bit differently. Now you'll notice, if we look in here at the bark, if you're familiar with cherry trees, a lot of the trees here in this prunus, it's going to have sort of a smooth bark with the little spots on it, almost like little eyes. Notice here that they are somewhat protected. They do have these objects, and one of the panelists will be able to tell me what it's called when a thorn is very large like that. There's a term for it when it's not necessarily thorn-like, because they do break if you press on them a little bit too much. So
I'm going to pause there. I think we had a discussion about this, Randy, that it's still called a thorn.
Yeah, yes, it is a thorn.
So I'll let one of the panelists tell us that. Okay. So now we're just going to continue down the trail, and I'll find a few places for us to stop. Okay, so we didn't make it too far down the trail before I found another one of our common native plants, especially in areas that are a little bit more moist. You'll notice here 3 leaflets, a very green stem, and the branches come off in an alternating pattern, or so they're paired. See that? This is Boxelder Maple. It can be a very, very large tree. It typically grows along creeks and streams. You see there's a little bit of a depression here, and plus the creek is not very much further down this way, as well as perhaps any drainage that's coming off of the highway that's up there. So this is probably a good spot for this young tree. We're going to continue down the trail, and we'll stop and take a look at some other common native plants. Now, as I was swinging the camera back around, I saw this plant over here, and in this case, I'm going to have to rely on one of the panelists to tell me what this is. It has a very sticky sort of stem. You can see those leaves there, those flowers curl, and has the pointies on it, almost like a stork's bill, but this is not. It's not the invasive stork's bill, or the naturalized, we'll say. And then walking over here, though, we're going to see this plant, very common this time of the year. And everybody was moving around on this stem as I was reaching for it, all those bugs. This is Spiderwort. Spiderwort is a bulb, so there will be a bulb down in here. They can spread from that bulb as that gets bigger, or it can go from the seeds once these flowers germinate and make seeds. This is a plant that you can use in a spot where you might have another native plant called Turk's Cap, so that you get a little bit of color in that area before the Turk's Cap comes up. Swing it around over here, you're going to see yucca. These are pretty twisty, so this is twist leaf yucca. There's also a pale leaf that tends to be more straight. And those over there are tending to be a little bit more straight and has sort of that color. But the fun thing about these is that they can also intermix. So you could end up with a pale twist leaf. Okay, we're going to continue down the trail, and I'll catch up with you down there. Now, this one I'm going to let one of the panelists step in on. I don't think it's a pencil cactus, but I could be wrong. We call those something a little bit different here.
Okay, I know a lot of you have your audio turned up really loud, so I'm going to speak kind of softly for a second. It's not pencil cactus. Sue, do you want to jump in on this one? Or
Gary,
Kathy?
that looks like a cholla.
Okay,
I'm not sure which one.
so we'll say cholla, maybe tree cholla.
Here. Okay. And what I want to kind of come down here and look at, everybody knows the prickly pears. These are not looking too happy. But let's take a look at this. And this is a wine cup. You can see there's the leaf structure. And this is the one that we affectionately call Williamson County wine cup. We've been finding it in more counties. Originally it was thought to be limited, very limited. It's in Volucrata is the species. And variety, I'll have to look up. I'll put that in the text so that you've got it. There's several of them here, kind of mixed in. Okay. Now we're going to go down this trail here, which is sort of a Cedar Grove. I like this trail especially in summer because it's relatively cool down here. Of course, there's always things to look at. Now here we've got a very early and pretty young emerging small tree. This is Wafer Ash, sometimes commonly known as hop tree. There's a story that some of the early pioneers used the seeds in place of hops, and I'm sure that made a pretty terrible beer, because sometimes we also call this skunk bush, because it has a little bit of a scent to it when you crush the leaves and smell them. If we come down just a bit here, what I'm going to see, does anyone know this grass preferably likes a little bit of shade? Okay. If you guessed inland sea oats, that is correct. So inland sea oats there, and this is just coming back. You can see some of the green coming up down there at the bottom. Now the great thing about this one, if you're trying to introduce another element besides color into your landscape, you can also add sound. When these are in big clumps together and the wind rustles through them, introduces a really nice sound. Now, I did mention that we're going to go down this path here, which is called Cedar Grove. Now remember, these are not actually cedar trees. They are ash junipers. So they are junipers, even though we call them cedars. We don't have any native actual cedar trees in Texas. So I'm going to stop here for just a second and talk about this plant. Probably because you're seeing it pop up all over your yard. You can see it's a bit sticky. If I pull one of these up here, it comes up pretty easily. Sometimes call it stick willy. I have a tendency to call it Velcro Weed because once it gets on you, it sticks pretty good. My personal preference is when I find this sprouting up in the yard, I take it out. But looking through here, not a bad looking little plant en masse. And I will let one of the panelists tell us if this is a native plant or a non-native plant. Looking over here, and let's take this one as an example. Sometimes early in the spring, or if you're hiking around a bit in winter when trees don't have any leaves on them, one way that you can identify a tree is by its bark. This warty bark is very, very common here. Does anyone know what tree has warty bark like this? If you guessed hackberry or sugarberry, you'd be correct. Come back up here. We've got a few leaves. Let me move this down so I'm not facing into the sun. Those are your hackberry. This has got, those aren't the berries, those look like galls. Yeah. And yeah, these are all galls. Galls, if you're not speaking properly. And we'll talk about what galls are. And you can see that warty bark over here on these as well. So this one's very, very warty. We'll continue down the trail this way. And sometimes you just look down and you find something to talk about. This is a pretty common vine. See, the leaflets are in leaflets of 5. You know, that little shininess may make somebody want to say, oh, it's poison ivy. But it is not poison ivy. This is Virginia creeper. Virginia creeper is a vine. It has little pads and sometimes tendrils that we'll use. So we'll see, probably can't get it as well with this camera. That little pad on the end of that tendril is what it will use to stick to things. It's a great plant to provide fruit for birds in winter. And it also gives us a bit of a bright red fall color. So if you've got something to let this climb up that it's not going to damage, or by leaving all those little pads stuck to it, then that's a little plant to consider. And it'll grow in some shady areas. So you can use it as a ground cover, or you can use it as a vine. We'll continue through here. That's a really fantastic live oak. Okay. Oop, warty bark. What plant was that? Now, these I happen to know just because I come through here so frequently, but there's a couple of characteristics about these two. I'm just going to rotate you around a little bit here. Has a bit of an orange tint to it. Let's see. And you can see it a little bit better down here on the ground where bikes and people have been stepping over it. It doesn't have any leaves on it. If I can get this just right, you see that smaller branch there, it does have thorns. Pretty good sized thorns too. So this little buddy over here, see how it kind of weeps down a little bit? You kind of see him be like that as well. What tree do you think this is? If you guessed Osage Orange, you'd be correct. It has several common names: horse apple, hedge apple, Osage Orange. Now we'll continue this way and around the corner. Okay, I want to stop here just a minute. There are several trees here together, and I want to take a look at these. And I want to find a good example. Make sure I'm not stepping on anything. I'll find a good example here. There we go. Just like that. See this winged? I call those winged. So it has those little corky growths on them. Pretty common on some of the young limbs and the smaller trees, but you also do see it on more of the mature ones. This is one of our most common trees. It can be pretty tall, sometimes growing up to 70 feet. This is a cedar elm. And they like to grow in communities like this, partially because they do spread a bit. So there. And I'm going to back up just some, make sure I'm not backing off of anything. And that's pretty common, at least when they're small like this. They tend to grow fairly columnar when they're more mature. Really beautiful trees. And they give us a great yellow fall color. You can see there's several of them back through there, mixed in with some ash junipers. So we're going to continue down this way and see what else we can find. Okay, so I didn't want to point these out. I knew what they were only because I've been through here enough times. But this one has a good indicator on it as to what this tree is. And if I can get it to focus properly. There we go. Well, for a second anyways. Right there. Okay. That's leftover. So that's leftover seed pods. These are flame leaf sumacs. And there's quite a few of them here together. Get a really bright red color in the fall, and they're pretty good small trees. They tend to be multi-trunked, but most of these young ones here look like they're single-trunked. There's maybe a multi-trunk one back there. Now, as I'm looking around down here on the ground, make sure I'm not stepping on anything that I shouldn't be, I see some rosettes from one of our common native wildflowers. These are cutleaf daisies. So have a nice sharp line there, sort of that white, and then very deeply lobed leaves. These will be yellow in probably these another couple of weeks. You might start seeing some of them popping up now. Of course, there's lots of yellow wildflowers, but that's a pretty common one. So this part of the trail was just sort of like a little dog leg. If we continued straight on instead of cutting down through that cedar grove, then we would have come down here. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue this way. These prickly pears look much better. And starting to see a bit of blue bonnets. Now, one of our members, Sue Wiseman, would be very irritated with me if I didn't point out this growing alongside this prickly pear. This is actually stuff from an insect. And it's called cochineal. If I smush this a little bit, see that bright red color? That is used as a dye. So to get that nice red color, that is cochineal. And there's another common wildflower. Good early spring bloomer. This is blue curls. And we'll have the genus and species so you can look that up. That is blue curls. Spreads pretty readily by seed. It's a really great native plant. Do see some blue bonnets as we're going down through here. More of those wine cups. And I was hoping that we would find some of these. You can see little orangey reddish dots along the path here. These, there we go. That is an Indian paintbrush. The interesting thing about these is they are semi-parasitic. Maybe the technical term is hemi-parasitic. They tend to grow in a place where there might be a grass, and it won't kill the plant that it is beside of, but it does get a portion of its nutrients from that plant. And it is usually not from bluebonnets. That's what most of the time people suspect, because they tend to grow in the same areas. Because bluebonnets are annuals, it needs a perennial plant in order to maintain its growth cycle all year round. Now there's a little clump over here of another common native wildflower. You can see sort of how its growth pattern is. Kind of comes up in a bit of a spray here. These are Mexican hats. So very, very early for these in their growth. They'll get much bigger, hopefully. These will. And finally, these that are just coming in. See, there's a pretty young one. Here's one that is a little further along, has a more distinctive leaf. These are Indian blankets. And pick my way back through here without trampling too much. The majority of what you're seeing here are cedar elms. Wow, that is a really great spot of Indian paintbrush. But there's quite a few of them. Now on the other side of the trail here, that is a tree that we looked at earlier. Got a bit of thorns. This is a bodark. See how it gets the young branches will sprout off of the older branches. See that? It kind of comes up in a bit of a wave and then comes back down. That's a pretty common shape when it's growing on its own, not shaded out by anything else. There we go. You get pretty large leaves on them, and then the fantastic thing about those are the really interesting fruit. Almost look like softball-sized brains, but round. Okay, we're going to continue down the trail here, and we'll find something else to look at.
So it looks like we got cut off there. There was just maybe another 5 minutes left where we returned back to the kiosk. That's sort of interesting. That worked a little bit earlier. So my apologies on that. I guess panelists, are there things that you want to add based on what you saw?
Excuse me, no, Gary, at this time, but I don't have anything else to add.
Okay.
I'm good to go, Gary.
Thanks, Kathy. So I did see some of the questions come through. I tried to touch on most of those. The Sue is letting me know that there was an endemic. It was the twist leaf yucca, and then Bob also mentioned that white wine cup that you saw. And the twist leaf is native to the Edwards Plateau. And then that white wine cup is in a few counties, Williamson, and I'm forgetting the other few now. All right. Well, for all of those that attended, I definitely appreciate it. Apologies that we got cut off there at the end. It just sort of shut down on me and decided that was the end of the video. So we'll definitely pay more attention to that in the future. When I terminate the webinar, you're going to get a little bit of a survey. Just go ahead and complete that for us. There's definitely some things that this was our first attempt at this, so there's definitely some things that we could have done a little bit better. I tend to be a little wavy with the camera, and I think that settling in on some of the plants and spending a little bit more time on it would have worked out a bit better. I was also just using my cell phone. We kind of quickly responded to having to cancel our walk that was going to take place at this time live versus being virtual. So definitely appreciate that. I do see some questions coming in. I'll take care of a few of those while we're going. And I've got one from Sue Harding who's asking, is cochineal an organism? It is. It's a type of scale insect. And there's an extraction process where they add some minerals, and that's how they get that dye, that cochineal red dye. I've got another question from Marcia. Is poison ivy up right now? I can definitely say yes. I trampled through a bit of it when I was looking through for those plants. And then thanks guys for the feedback and enjoying this. Do make sure that you download your resources, your handouts. Those are obviously yours to keep. And if there's any questions that you have, you can always send me an email. And if I can't answer it, I'll hand off to somebody much more smarter than I am about it. Okay.
Thank you, Gary.
All right, thank you, Randy. Panel, anything else?
Way to go, Gary. Thank you.
All right, you're very welcome. Okay, well, everybody, please stay safe. Enjoy the wonderful time that you're going to have at home. It's getting about time for maybe adult beverages. So it's a good way to end a hike. So thank you all for attending. Please stay healthy.